Athens picked its government by lottery for 2 centuries. Iceland used the same method to draft its constitution after the 2008 collapse. And there's possibly a reason you haven't been told about that. But this question keeps coming back to me. When I watch the news and I see the same dramas and the same noise and the same protection of the 1%, I catch myself wondering what would actually represent the rest of us. So of course I went looking, and the alternatives do exist, but they've been buried for a reason. There are 5 systems that I've come across that have already been proven to work. They've been tested, they've been documented, and they have largely been forgotten. The first is sortition. That's a random selection of representatives by lot. So Athens did it for most of its democracy. The only elected were generals and treasurers because those positions needed expertise, but everything else was a lottery. The modern versions include Ireland's Citizens' Assembly, which broke the abortion deadlock in 2008. France ran a Citizens' Convention on Climate, and Iceland used citizens' assemblies to redraft its constitution after the 2008 collapse. Sortition works for a structural reason. You can't bribe a system you can't predict. You can't capture a body whose membership you don't know in advance. And it cuts the entire campaign finance pathway out of the loop, which is why it isn't in mainstream conversation, because it makes the political class redundant. Those career politicians who've never run a business, who've never managed a payroll, who've never lived an ordinary life, well, they are the ones currently deciding for the rest of us. The second is participatory budgeting. In Porto Alegre in Brazil, they started this in 1989. Citizens directly allocated chunks of the municipal budget themselves, and as a result, corruption fell. Public services improved, health outcomes got better, and the model spread to roughly 1,500 cities worldwide, but you've probably barely heard of it. The third is worker ownership at scale. In Mondragon in the Basque country, it employs 80,000 worker owners. The profits stay local, and the decisions get made by the people who are actually doing the work. It's existed since the 1950s, and it functions. The salary ratio between top and bottom is capped at around 6:1. The US S&P 500 ratio runs at about 350:1. The fourth is commons governance, which is the self-organised management of shared resources by the communities that depend on them. Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in 2009 for demonstrating with decades of fieldwork that commons could be successfully governed by communities without state or market intervention. The tragedy of the commons theory was a 1968 ideological move designed to justify privatisation, but the actual evidence said the opposite. The Nobel Committee eventually had to acknowledge it. The fifth is the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is made up of 6 indigenous nations. A constitutional democracy with female veto on war, where power is distributed across the nations, and a 7th generation rule requires decisions to be assessed for their impact 140 years out. The American founders studied it and borrowed the structural elements they liked, but they dropped the ones that would have constrained elite power, particularly the female authority and particularly the long time horizon. Why? So the alternatives exist. They have been tested, they work, but let's have a look at who's been telling us they don't. Everyone whose position depends on it never working. Mainstream media, funded by and culturally dependent on the same economic order, any real alternative would have to indict. Mainstream academia, structured around grants and tenure pathways that align with not asking the wrong questions. What about schools, designed in the 19th century to produce factory workers with curriculums that still reflect that purpose? The "there is no alternative" line was Thatcher's deliberate slogan from 1980. Mark Fisher called the cultural condition that grew out of it capitalist realism, which is the inability to imagine the end of capitalism, even as it becomes easier to imagine the end of the world. Buried. Every civilization has produced people who saw the architecture clearly. The Gnostics, the Cathars, the witches of Europe, the mystics inside every major tradition who were declared heretics. Indigenous knowledge holders across the Americas, Africa and Australia, across 2 millennia and across continents, the same response. Bury it, burn it, kill the carriers of the knowledge, write them out of the record. So let's look at the timing. Athanasius issued his Easter letter in 367 CE, declaring the official Christian canon, and the Nag Hammadi texts were hidden in a jar in the Egyptian desert in the same generation. The European witch burnings peaked between 1450 and 1750, running in lockstep with the enclosure of the commons and the early consolidation of capital. Diego de Landa burned the main codices in 1562, exactly when Spanish colonial extraction was being built out. The Dead Sea Scrolls were recovered in 1947 and then sat on by a tiny group of scholars for 40 years before their full release. So whatever anyone thinks of any individual case, the pattern is too consistent to be an accident. Knowledge gets buried exactly when power is being consolidated. And what gets buried is the same thing across all of these cases. Anything that places authority inside the person rather than inside an institution. Anything that says you can know directly. Anything that names the architecture and gives the carrier of knowledge a way out. So they don't need a priest, they don't need a king, they don't need the company, they don't need the platform, they don't need the state. All of these systems got buried. The text got burned and the knowing was forbidden. The witch hunts targeted women who held knowledge of bodies, of herbs, of birth, of death, and of the land. But the new order needed that knowledge to not be available. And that's the same logic that runs today. Big Pharma sits on cures that can't be patented. Treatments that aren't profitable don't get developed. The Council of Nicaea decided which Gospels Christians would read, and the new order needed certain teachings not to be available. But a free society doesn't need a council, and it doesn't need an inquisition. The amount of institutional energy spent over the centuries to bury, ban, burn, discredit and ridicule particular kinds of knowing tells you precisely how dangerous that knowing was considered, because they wouldn't have buried it if it didn't work. I think the work runs on 2 tracks: the future work, the structural one where we learn what's been hidden, we build small, we work in local councils and cooperatives and mutual aid networks and food systems. Basically the structures that already exist below the level of capture. And the second one is the recovery one, going back into what was buried and asking the questions: by whom, when and why? The answer to by whom is always the same set of interests. The answer to why is always the same too. This was knowledge that restored authority to the people who held it, and the project required them not to have it. You don't have to fix it tonight, and you don't have to know what comes next. But you do just have to stop believing the people who bury the alternatives are the only ones with the answers. Start there, because then the rest comes.